English tool catalogs have like 25 or 30 different chisel patterns. This is the one that seems to be everybody's favorite, except maybe for use for some, but it's a great user. And it's termed a best London octagonal chisel handle. A best London chisel doesn't have the octagonal factor. A London octagonal doesn't have this little part here. So you've got this whole thing that you need to say what this is. It's a best London octagonal handle.
What's the worst?
That's the one I made.
I think I've got some.
Isn't that it right there? Isn't that the with the bark on
this
it?
one. No, this is an embryo. Those ones are all originals, and these ones are ones I've made. There's a very good description of making a best London octagonal handle that Jim Thompson did.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
With an indexing lathe and precision to 1 or 2 degrees. And I tell you that they can't have done it that way. They were churning these out, and I couldn't possibly do it that way.
Yeah.
And this is about how you do it if you don't have the 360 degree index on your power machine lathe, plus the character to use that tool. If you look at it, there are 4 areas. You've got the ferrule and the S-curve. That's not an emoji, is it? I forget what the technical term is, but and the octagon and the butt. I have an extremely crude lathe, and it doesn't track true. So I have to mark which way I put it onto the 2-prong drive center. And the drive center is on the right, not on the left. And it's all a bit of a pain. So what I'm going to do, this is the first step in making it. You turn the area of the S-curve and the area of the butt to the size of the smaller radius of the octagon. And that's a reasonably precise number, or a reasonably precise size, and more important, it has to be the same here and here. Now beyond here and here, I faded away a little bit. And then the barrel has to be big enough to allow for the octagon, which if you have one to copy from, which I was lucky to have, you can measure across. But I think that 1/8 of an inch is likely to be always enough. And I'm using a bit of hickory branch I was given. The next step here is to plane the octagon. That's basically what I'm going to be showing. The turning up to this stage and the turning after the octagon is made is pretty ordinary. There's a trick to the octagon. Now, remember I mentioned this deep, important groove. Well, if you think for a moment, if you could have the control to plane it, starting the blade right here and ending it right here in that groove, then you would get an absolutely precise octagon as far as the relationship to the diameter of the whole piece goes. Because when you got down to, when you bottomed out, rubbing on your sole here and here, this would be just right. And in fact, my first one I did that way, basically starting every stroke here and stopping it short right here. And after that, by little bits, I realized I was doing work I didn't have to. Because if you put down 2 layers of masking tape, on your bearing surface, so now the bearing surface is the masking tape. And what happens when you actually finish with one facet of the octagon? You nick the masking tape. And so what you want, I've nicked a little bit here, and I've grossly nicked here. If you do this, and that hasn't gotten far enough yet, you just replace this masking tape. And now you've got a new bearing surface in the same place. And you try not to nick this again. But if you nick it a second time, you replace it a second time. And so you're never going to grossly over trim this way. Now you may be out this way. So you have to be careful to keep the surface flat. And on the first one, that's pretty much all you have to do is to keep it flat. I have found that because I do replace these fairly often, I nick into it a fair amount. And so it makes better sense to do 2 single layers than 1 double.
Okay,
Close enough.
I'm using branchwood on this, which would have been normal for boxwood. And I have just about the right size branch. This is the end of the first planing step, and I cut it a bit too close there. I've got bark on it. Now, some of these I have done with my bench vise, and this is weird. Sometimes I can get these to hold in the vise, and sometimes I can't. And I think I would normally do the first facet in the vise no matter what. even though I'm not trying to stop in that cut, still I'm not letting it get out of hand. I'm trying to keep it controlled. I have this set fairly closely. This is definitely something where you don't scrub back and forth. Okay, now, I feel like I maybe did a little bit more than I should have. Now, it's obvious what I'm doing, but I don't do it like this because if I do it like this, turning it will give me a false bit of light. And I can see very little on the end at my right side and a lot at the end on my left side. So I'm not going to go to a finer set plane yet, but I am going to start the blade somewhere around here rather than right here, so that I will gradually shift the plane I'm cutting in from something like this to something more like that. Of course, if you'll notice, I got my cap in the tape right where it's going to be a nuisance. Do you want me to pass it around so you can look at this that way?
I can see it.
Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I've just been lucky so far. If you notice, there's a little tiny nick here. So, that's my reference plane, and I'm going to mark that so that I know where it is. Of course, all of that's going to be turned away. And the next thing is perfectly straightforward and ordinary. It looks like it wouldn't be. But all you're doing is planing a second surface at right angles to the first. It's not going to be touching it,
Right, because there's.
but it's still just a surface at right angles to the first. The other thing that's tricky about it is that at the point when you bottom out, it has to be right. That little knot was unexpected. I'm going to see if I can deal with it by putting it at the start of the cut instead of at the back of the cut. I think I'll go to the finer set plane at this point. These are both duller than they should be, but that one needs a bad road map on it. I'll have to probably replace that area of tape pretty soon. But for the moment, I'm going to just not let the blade come back that far. I have to correct a little bit this way. You know, that's straightforward. It just is time consuming. Okay, now, sometimes I've done this in my vise, and sometimes it just sinks into my vise. I don't know why. Maybe that'll happen when I start working on the second floor. But I've also ordinary. This is my second bench hook, and I have not used this factory yet on this one, but I did on the other one. Just couldn't find the other one. You don't even have to. This is not true enough that I would be doing that, but that's all you need. It's a ½ inch. It's dropped into a ½ inch hole. Not glued or anything, because that would impair the usefulness of the bench hook. But anytime I wanted to use the bench hook without this, I just pull it out, and it's a ½ inch if I'm using it. And I get into the habit of holding it in the vise because the vise is in the way, so that's getting the vise as much out of the way as it can. Okay, so now about orders, and you just do them. There's no big deal about it. In this case, I've got a little bit of a land left at the quarter. So now you're just
Design flaw. Exactly. Scrap that. Always takes 2 tries.
I'm not positive that this is quite right yet, but the thing is I can check with it from here, and on both I find that this error is the one that's slightly high. Final thing is when you have the octagon done, you return it to the lathe, and the ferrule, and then the S-curve. I followed measurements I took measurements from this one initially, And I adjusted them very carefully in proportion in making this one. And at this point on this one, I'm just about ready to say, to hell with the measurements, I'll just do it by. Oh, there is one other important thing. To drill the hole, I set a 1/8" bit in a pilot hole for this. I have a 2-prong drive center on the lathe that is on the right. Hold that against the drive center and have the dead center backed off. And I use that with the dead center to get this at about the right angle. Okay, hold them together. Now, if you're like this, you're going to get one. And the closer you are to having them centered, the more cleanly you'll go in and out. And this might be quite dangerous on a power lathe, but a foot treadle lathe, if something goes wrong, the power source stops. So you're a lot safer in a lot of ways. And you don't get a really dead true hole doing this. You have to adjust you have to finesse things a bit when you're putting the tang in. But since every tang chisel I've come across so far had a bent tang, you have to finesse things doing that anyway. So, especially if you're burning it, you can correct from being this much out to being this much out while you're burning it. So, you just have to get a little closer and a little closer. And I think I would probably do that hole after I've got everything else done as the last step before parting off. Okay.
That's good, Tom. Thank you very much.
That's great.
I'm a man on the scene. I can give you what you want, but you got to go home with me. I forgot some good old love, and then I got some in store.